Knowledge. At this point, we can speak of the work octave. This sounds do, as evaluation of the work, which means that nothing can begin, unless there is valuation, and this is nothing mysterious. We cannot begin anything unless we think it worth our while, and the worth of a thing lies in its value for us. We have to have a feeling for it, to the extent that if we regard something as worthless then we shall obviously not value it. This particular do is not sounded just when we come in contact with the work. It may be so that when we hear the ideas of the work, they could fall on some ready-prepared place in us, upon magnetic center. We may feel that here is what we have wanted, and been searching for all along. This valuation is due to the action of the kind of magnetic center in us. In different people, magnetic center is however different. It lies in emotional parts of centers, in the places where we feel worth, or sense quality, where we feel valuation, for valuation is emotional. However, this, so to speak, first love, will not last long. It may be a very beautiful feeling, yet it passes away, having fulfilled its task, and we are left with the task of revaluation. For magnetic center may bring a person into the work, but it will not keep them in it. Undoubtedly everyone has known the blush and emotion of first love, those extraordinary and unearthly feelings that come in early life, which are not physical, but rather devotional, and which seem to be touched by influences coming from higher emotional center. However, later comes quite a different task, that of practical relationship building. It is just the same with regard to this work. It is often said that we repeat the history of our life, of love in the work itself. We know when we first met the work, what sense of wonder, what sense of mystery, of the miraculous, that reminded us of early youthful enthusiasm, feelings indeed that seem self-sustaining, and only slightly connected with an outer object, a person. But whatever early emotions we may have felt with regard to the ideas of the work, and the discovery that such a thing really exists, whatever extraordinary feelings we may have experienced, they are not enough. Even if we have the right magnetic center, the feeling and emotions that spring from it will not last. We must get to know the object of our love, to relate ourselves to it practically. The note re in the work octave is sounded when a person begins to study the ideas of the work and its teaching, then begins to apply the work to themselves. This note re is called application of the work to oneself. And if the note do, sounded first by magnetic center, does not change its quality, but remains simply a feeling of the miraculous, then the note re will not sound strongly enough. Yet no one will pass into the work unless there is at least some initial feeling of the miraculous. An individual must feel the difference between life and the work. Otherwise the work will fall on the places that life falls upon in us, on those parts of centers that cannot receive, and are not meant to receive the work. We have parts of centers for life, and parts of centers for the work. We are constructed by nature for life, and for the work. However, not possessing magnetic center, we will take in the ideas of the work to the life parts of our centers. We will try to add the work directly to life, as if it were the same thing. Pouring new wine into old bottles, patching an old coat with new cloth and so on. It is the function of magnetic center to prevent this. Magnetic center is sometimes defined as the capacity for distinguishing between A and B influences, between life influences, influences created in mechanical life, and influences that come from outside life, sewn into mechanical life. Unless magnetic center exists, nothing would be possible with regard to inner evolution. No transformation of the feeling of life, or the feeling of oneself would be possible. Yet, as noted, magnetic center, once its part is played, is no longer of use. It introduces us to a new world. But we must then find our own way thereafter. It may bring a person to the work, making it possible for them to value the work, but that is all. An individual must then revalue the work for themselves, through the application of its ideas, to themselves and to their whole standpoint, then this will strengthen the do in them. Which means, the note re will strengthen the note do in us, and change its quality to a conscious evaluation. Seeing the truth of the work, an individual will value it in a more and more conscious way, then this revaluation will strengthen do, making it a real do. For we must consider whether a do sounded by magnetic center is really a consciously sounded do. The third note in the work octave, the note, mi, is called the realization of personal difficulties. This has many sides to it, many different meanings for each individual. There are, for example, personal difficulties that appear with regard to one's being. Then there are personal difficulties connected with one's knowledge, with assimilating certain sides of the work as knowledge. For there are many strange ideas that relate to the knowledge side of the work, ideas that we may have heard many times, but have not yet begun to acknowledge. In this work we have to think in a new way, which is possible only through new knowledge, for we will always think in the same way unless we have new knowledge. New thinking demands new knowledge, but new knowledge will not make us think in a new way, unless it is acknowledged. Yet, we must be able to think in a new way, for otherwise we will never see our life, and never see the meaning of this work in context. Work on knowledge is as difficult as work on being. It is even more difficult to understand, and all of this belongs to one's realization of personal difficulties. Note me. There are many complex things said in the work, which means that things are said that strike against our usual forms of knowledge. We meet with this in every form of esoteric teaching. For example, Christ often says to his disciples, "If you can bear it," which means that knowledge, great knowledge, knowledge about man and his situation on earth, our possibilities, is not something that we can take in an everyday manner, or combine with ordinary ideas, or consider as being foolish, because it does not correspond with our opinions. Great knowledge demands great sacrifice, and a long struggle with oneself. So in examining the work teaching on knowledge itself, which is not easy to accept, one must reflect upon many things at length, until they become part of our mind. During one conversation with Gurdjieff, in the group of which Ouspensky was part, he asked, why, if ancient knowledge has been preserved, and if, speaking in general, there always existed a knowledge distinct from our science and philosophy, even surpassing it, why is it so carefully concealed? Why is it not made common property? Why are the people who possess this special knowledge unwilling to let it pass into general circulation, for the sake of a better and more successful struggle with deceit, evil and ignorance? This is a question which usually arises in everyone's mind at first acquaintance with the ideas of esotericism, and there are two answers to it. In the first place, this knowledge is not concealed, and in the second place it cannot, from its very nature, become common property. Reflect upon the second of these statements first, and consider that knowledge, Gurdjieff emphasized the word, is far more accessible to those capable of assimilating it than is usually supposed, and the trouble is that people either do not want it, or simply cannot receive it. Understand, too, something else, that knowledge cannot belong to all, it cannot even belong to the many. Such is the law. We do not understand this initially, because we do not understand that knowledge, like everything else in the world, is actually material. It is material, which means that it possesses all the characteristics of materiality. One of the first characteristics of materiality is that matter in a given place and under given conditions is limited. Even the sand of the desert and the water of the sea are a definite and unchangeable quantity. So that, if knowledge is material, then it means that there is a definite quantity of it available at any given moment. And it may be said that in the course of a certain period of time, say a century, humanity has a definite amount of knowledge at its disposal. However, we know, even from our ordinary observation of life, that the matter of knowledge possesses entirely different qualities, according to whether it is taken in small or in large quantities. Taken in a large quantity in a given place, that is, by one person let us say, or by a small group of individuals, it produces very good results. Taken in a small quantity, by every one of a large number of people, it gives no results at all, or it may even yield negative results, contrary to those expected. Hence, if a certain definite quantity of knowledge is distributed among millions of people, each individual will receive very little, and this small amount of knowledge will change nothing, either in their life, or in their understanding of things. However large this number of people, who receive that small amount of knowledge, it will change nothing in their lives, except perhaps to make them still more difficult. But, if on the contrary, large quantities of knowledge are concentrated on a small number of people, then this knowledge will yield great results. From that point of view, it is more advantageous that knowledge be preserved among a smaller number of people, and not dispersed among the masses. If we take a certain quantity of gold, then decide to gild a number of objects with it, we must know, or calculate exactly what number of objects can be gilded with this quantity of gold. If we try to gild a greater number, they will be covered with gold unevenly, in patches, and will look much worse than if they had no gold at all. In fact, we shall lose our gold. The distribution of knowledge is based upon exactly the same principle. If knowledge is given to all, nobody will get any. If it is preserved among the few, each will receive not only enough to keep, but to increase what they receive, which is the principle of alchemy. At first glance this may seem unjust, since the position of those who are, so to speak, denied knowledge in order that others may receive a greater share, appears to be very sad, and undeservedly harder than it ought to be. However, this is not so at all, and in the distribution of knowledge there is not the slightest injustice. The fact is, that the enormous majority of people do not want any knowledge whatsoever, they refuse their share of it, and do not even take the ration allotted to them in the general distribution, for the purposes of life. This is particularly evident in times of mass madness such as war, revolutions, and civil unrest, when people suddenly seem to lose even the small amount of common sense they had, turning into complete automatons, giving themselves over to wholesale destruction in vast numbers, in other words, even losing the instinct of self-preservation. Owing to this, enormous quantities of knowledge remain, so to speak, unclaimed, and can be distributed among those who actually realize its value. There is nothing unfair about this, because those who receive knowledge take nothing that belongs to others, deprive others of nothing. They take only what others have rejected as useless, and what would in any case be lost if they did not take it. The collecting of knowledge by some, therefore, depends upon the rejection of knowledge by others. There are periods in the life of humanity, which generally coincide with the beginning of the fall of cultures and civilizations, when the masses irretrievably lose their reason, and begin to destroy everything that has been created through centuries and millennia of culture. Such periods of mass madness, often coinciding with geological cataclysm, climatic changes, and similar phenomena of a planetary nature, release a very great quantity of the matter of knowledge. This, in its turn, necessitates the work of collecting this matter of knowledge, which would otherwise be lost. Thus the work of collecting scattered substance of knowledge frequently coincides with the beginning of the destruction and fall of cultures and civilizations. This aspect of the question is clear. The crowd neither wants nor seeks knowledge, and the leaders of the crowd, in their own interests, try to strengthen this fear and dislike of everything new or unknown. The slavery in which mankind lives is based upon that fear. It is even difficult to imagine all the horror of their slavery. We do not understand what people are losing. But in order to understand the cause of the slavery, it is enough to see how people live, what constitutes the aim of their existence, the object of their desires, passions, and aspirations, of what they think, of what they talk, what they serve, and what they worship. Consider what the cultured humanity of our time spends money on, what commands the highest price, where the biggest crowds are, what solicits the greatest applause and widespread attention. If we think for a moment about these questions, it becomes clearer that humanity, such as it is now, with the interests it lives by, cannot expect to have anything different from what it has. As has been noted, it could never be otherwise. Imagine that for the whole of mankind, ½ pound of knowledge is allotted each year. If this knowledge were to be distributed among everyone, each would receive so little that they will remain the fool that they are. But, thanks to the fact that very few want to have knowledge, those who take it are able to get, let us say, a grain each, and acquire the possibility of becoming more intelligent. All cannot become intelligent, even if they wished to. And if they did become intelligent, it would not help matters. There exists a general equilibrium of great nature's purpose which cannot be upset. That is one aspect of it. The other consists of the fact that no one is concealing anything, there is no mystery whatsoever. But the acquisition or transmission of true knowledge demands great labor and great sacrifice, both from those who receive and from those who give it. Then those who possess knowledge are doing everything that they can to transmit and communicate it to the greatest possible number of people, to facilitate people's approach to it, and to enable them to prepare themselves to receive this truth. However, knowledge cannot be given by force to anyone, and an unprejudiced survey of the average individual's life, of what fills their day, and of the things they are interested in, the things that they value most, will show through social media at the very least, whether it is possible to accuse those who possess knowledge of concealing it, of not wishing to give it to others, or of not wishing to teach people what they know themselves. Those who want knowledge must themselves make the initial effort to find the source of knowledge, and then approach it, taking advantage of the help and indications that are given to all, but which people as a rule do not want to see or recognize. Knowledge cannot come to anyone without effort on their part. They understand this very well in connection with ordinary knowledge, but in the case of great knowledge, when they admit the possibility of its existence, they find it possible to expect something different. Everyone knows that if, for example, someone wants to learn Chinese, that it will take several years of intense work. Everyone knows that 7 years are needed to grasp the principles of medicine, to study law and be admitted to the bar, then perhaps twice as many years for the study of painting or music. And yet there are theories which affirm that knowledge can come to people without any effort on their part, that they can acquire it even in sleep. The very existence of such theories constitutes an additional explanation as to why knowledge cannot come to people. At the same time, it is essential to understand that our independent effort to attain anything in this regard can also yield no result. A person can only attain knowledge with the help of those who possess it. This must be understood from the very beginning. One must learn from those who know.